Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Tonight I wanted to go over with you some of the basics I've learned while starting my knitting adventure. I am not an expert, I'm not even really a proficient or anything like that. I am, for lack of a better term, like basically a fledgling. I am just starting out, and I thought it would be fun to share the basics with you. So I don't have that many sets of needles. I just have a couple that were donated to me graciously by a neighbor. I had told her that I was very excited to start knitting, and she went through her stock and had several extra sets, and so she donated them to me, which was very sweet of her. These are single point needles. There's many different types. There's single point, there's double point where there's this point on both ends, and then there are circular needles. Neither of which I am even ready to start using. So for now I just stick with the single points. They come in different sizes. These are US size 9. And they say US because there are a couple different types of sizes. I think there's three, because I think Canada has their own sizes too. But for lack of knowledge of those sizes, we'll talk about the US versus the British sizes. So the US sizes are pretty simple. The lower the number on the needle, the smaller the diameter of the needle, which means the smaller your stitch. The larger the number, the bigger the diameter, and the larger the stitch. And that's because the yarn has to go around the needle. So obviously if you have a smaller needle, you're going to use less yarn to go around the needle than you would if you had a larger needle. The British size system is the exact opposite. So they have high numbers for low diameter and low numbers for bigger diameters and stitches. There's a couple of different ways that you can kind of start to learn. But for myself, I actually I read a couple of tutorials that I just kind of found on Google, and then I figured, I want to try to knit a scarf. And so I went on this wonderful page. I cannot remember the name off the top of my head. I'll find it and I'll link it below. But I found her tutorials wonderful. They were very easy to understand, and just all around like a really nice way to get started. So again, these aren't the needles that I'm currently in process with. I did use these needles to knit my very first scarf. They were shorter and easy to manipulate, which was good for me at the time, and still is, because I'm not that great at this. There are many, many, many different types and weights of yarn. When I first started to decide I wanted to excuse me, thinking that I wanted to knit, I just pulled some scrap yarn that I had out of my crafting boxes, and all I had was this very fine like shoestring type yarn. And personally, like my personal opinion, I have found that the thinner yarns are not as easy to work with. I can still manage these with a little bit of difficulty, but I found that the thicker yarns are easier for me as a beginner. It's just easier for me to hold and keep track of and work with, and I'm practicing a lot so that eventually I can just use whatever yarn I want. And I was really sad because, as you can see, This is a lovely yarn. It's kind of an ombre, pink into gray, into this lovely purple color. And I don't know if you can see very well, it sparkles a little bit. I thought this was beautiful. I'd bought it for a different project, and I can't even remember what that was now, but maybe one day I'll get good enough to use this for knitting. For now, though, I went and picked up a much thicker yarn. You can see how much thicker that is. I'll show you just as a comparison. Oops. You can see the size difference. This one was so much easier for me to learn with. Just so much easier. So this is the one I'm using. This is a bulkier yarn, and it's much easier to grasp, for beginners at least. I don't know, I mean, some of you guys who are beginners, you guys might actually do really well with the thinner yarn, but for me personally, it's the thicker yarn. So the first thing I want to show you is how to, at least how I learned how to start a scarf, and show you how to cast on, and then I'll show you that to my best ability, I will show you how to do a knit stitch and a purl stitch. So if you want to hang around for those, stay tuned. Alright, so you have a couple different terms here. You have your end of the yarn. This is some leftover from the first scarf that I knit, and then the rest of this that's attached to the ball of yarn is going to be called our working yarn. So you'll pick up your needle. If you're worried about knowing what size needle to use with a yarn that you buy, it's kind of nice. A lot of times on the packaging for the yarn, it'll indicate what size needle is best for it, or what size crochet hooks if you're a crocheter. So you can always look on the packaging. So take my tail, and I'm going to make a slip knot. You want a couple extra inches here so that you have something to work with. So to make a slip knot, you just make a loop like this, and then you're going to take your tail, pull it through the loop, just like that, and pull it tight. So that you've got a loop here, you've got your working yarn, and your tail. I'm going to make that a little bit shorter because that's too long of a tail for me personally. So just loop. I gotta get it to the right length. Sorry guys. Loop. See, that's too short of a tail. Twist your loop, and then pull your slip knot through. Okay. You'll take your slip knot, whichever needle you want to pick, just pull to tighten it up onto your needle. Now, again, this is your tail, you've got a few inches here. When you're tightening this onto your needle, don't crank it like super hard and tight onto here, because then you won't be able to get your other needle through. You want it so that it can easily kind of go back and forth, but it's not super loose. So for example, like that's way too big. I can get my finger to it. So just tighten it up a little. Okay. Now you're going to cast on. Casting on is, there's a couple different ways, but this is the easy way for me as a beginner. Casting on is basically where you're adding the number of stitches that you want to use. So when I knit my first scarf, I cast on, I believe, 15 stitches, and with my second scarf that I'm in process with right now, I also used 15 stitches. But for the purposes of this quick intro, we're going to just cast on 10. So to cast on, you've got your end here. Keep your tail kind of tucked there so you don't accidentally try to knit it, just keep it in your hand. Make a loop, kind of hold it in your hand like this, kind of like a gun. I'm sorry if that offends anybody. And just make a loop like this and put it on there, and then just slide it down so that it's next to your first stitch, like this. Slide it through and put it on. Like that. Oh, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. She's dreaming. She just kind of yelped a little bit. I promise she's okay. She's just dreaming. I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. See that loop? It's basically just crossed over like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So slide these down a bit. If you're not sure, just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is determining how wide your scarf is going to be. Okay, so if you wanted a thicker scarf, you just cast on more. If you wanted a thinner one, then you just cast on less. So the whole point is to transfer your stitches from one needle to another. And there's 2 different kinds of stitches, at least that I have learned so far. The first one is called a knit stitch, and this is the one that I do pretty well with, but I'm a little rusty with purling. So just kind of hold your needle in this hand, and then your working needle is going to be in your dominant hand. So you've got your tail, your stitches, and then this is called your working yarn, because this yarn is attached to your ball of yarn. So I'm right hand dominant, so I hold everything in the right hand. When you start knitting, you'll kind of figure out what method works best for you. For me, I hold everything in my right hand. So to do a knit stitch, you're just going to go through the loop. Oops. Let's see if I can hold this closer. Through the bottom of the loop. So you're basically crossing this under your needle that your stitches are currently on. And you can see it's through the bottom. Take your working yarn, come back and around that bottom needle, pull it down. So now your yarn is crisscrossed in between the needles. You can take your second needle, pull it back. You're going to catch that working yarn and feed it through that stitch, just like that. Don't make them too big. Then you'll just pop that stitch out, just like that. Okay, and so you've transferred one stitch. I'll show you again. Pass through the stitch on the needle, working yarn, around and down in between. Pull your second needle to catch that loop and pull it through the stitch, then pop it off. I've transferred 2. So pass under through the loop. Oops. Working yarn, down and around. Pull down, keep a little tension on it so you don't lose that stitch. And then pull it through that loop. Okay, and you just keep going like that until you've transferred all your stitches. towards the end. So pass below, down around, pull down, catch that needle or that yarn, pull it through, pop off the other stitch. So now you've transferred all your stitches onto your new needle. So that's how you do a knit stitch. To do a purl stitch, keep your tail in this hand. To do a purl stitch, you're going to cross your new needle on top of your needle that currently holds your stitches. So with a knit stitch, we passed under through the loop, like that. For a purl stitch, we're going to pass over through the loop. So go ahead and go through the top, just like that. Now with a purl stitch, see how my yarn's over here? You need to bring it forward so that your yarn is here in the middle. Then you're going to take your yarn, go pull it up so that it's in the middle still. You're going to go down and around that needle and pull down. Now what you do is you pull the new needle back, you're setting it back, and you pass it through the bottom and pop that stitch off. I'll show you again. So pass through the top, okay, through the middle, down and around. Sorry, my big hands are in the way. Bring it down. Oh, I lost it. Nope. Lost it. Okay. Sorry guys, my purl stitches need work. Up through the middle, down around, pull tight so you don't lose it, and then come through the bottom, pop that stitch off. Okay. Through the top again, around, catch it, and go through. That's why it's important that your stitches aren't too tight, because otherwise you can't pass this needle through the loops. And then you can't get your stitches in. So back through the top, come around that top needle, and pass it through the bottom, and slide your stitch off. Oops, see, I almost tried to do a knit stitch. I'm so used to doing knit stitches, I need to work on my purling. Through the top. I'm a lot slower with purling because I have not practiced it. Pass through the top. Hey Sophie. One of my dogs is over here. Bottom, pull off. Through the top. Behind and around. Pass it through. Pop the stitch off. Down and around. Through the bottom, pull the stitch off. So it starts a pattern, and once again you've transferred all your stitches onto your other needle again. And so you could continue to knit a row and purl a row and knit a row and purl a row, however you choose to keep going. Again, you still have your tail over here. You want to make sure as you get farther along in your piece, your tail becomes a little less worrisome. A couple of times when I was first starting, I somehow wound this into my knitting. So, but that's kind of how you start. And like I said, I am not very good at purling yet. It takes me quite a bit longer to purl a row than it does to knit a row. So kind of an intro. Just slide this off. We'll just pull it apart. Pull our slip knot out, and I can roll all this back up to save it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the scarf that I'm currently working on and kind of chit-chat with you guys a little bit while I work on it for a couple of rows. So I'll be right back. Here's the scarf that I'm currently working on. I'm using a US size 8 set of needles for this. That shows up. US size 8 for the needle. That's just what this particular packaging recommended. I've done, you can see here's my tail. I've done this whole scarf so far with a knit stitch. It's just what I'm comfortable with doing for right now. This scarf is actually going to be for a friend of mine who's moving. But I liked the kind of mauve color that it was. Sorry, a little bit of dry mouth. It's kind of a mauve color with white mixed in. I thought for the scarves that I would be doing in the giveaway that I'd use some neutral colors like gray or black, just so that nobody gets a color they hate. I wouldn't want to do a bright yellow scarf or a green, anything like that, because I know some people don't like those colors, so I figured gray and black would probably be good. One of the things I learned from that, the lady whose YouTube channel I will link in the description, is how to get this nice clean edge that you see. She was describing how she got that because I really liked the look of it, and she drops the first stitch. So normally earlier when I showed you the knit stitch, I knitted the first one. I dropped this first stitch, so let me show you. Just get my needles here. I'm trying not to bump my camera. So I've passed through underneath because I'm going to knit. And instead of knitting that stitch, I'm just going to transfer it to the other needle. So no knitting. But I will knit the second stitch. Go behind, come around, and down. And then catch it going through the bottom. Pop that stitch off. Tension is a really tricky thing I've learned. I'm still trying to get mine right, but I've learned that in order to make sure that I'm not making my stitches too tight, I have kind of developed, give myself some string there, extra yarn to work with. I've kind of developed a little way to, I hold my needles further down, I don't choke up towards the top, and I push the needle through further than I would probably need to, so that I get a little, and I rock that loop off of this needle. So go down through the bottom, pull this, go down around and come back, pull it between, catch it and bring it up, pull it, and I'll rock it off the first needle. Below, down around, pull down, pull through, pull up a little bit, and rock off the top. Okay. I'm trying to do this without bumping my camera, so forgive me if it's a little weird. My first scarf I finished in about a week, mostly because I was gone and I didn't have a ton of time to work on it. This one I've also been taking slowly. As you can see, my knit stitches go a lot faster than my purl stitches. My purl stitches are so slow, it's almost painful. So I'm sorry for anybody that was irritated by that. It's probably like nails on a chalkboard. for you seasoned knitters. Pass my last stitch on this one. Okay. Spread my stitches back out. Switch hands. Okay. Go through the bottom, drop that first loop, and knit the second stitch. Whoops. Knitting has definitely helped my anxiety. My mind works overtime, 24/7, which means when I'm trying to go to sleep at night, I pretty much lay there for 2 or 3 hours minimum. And knitting has helped. What I'll do is I'll just start knitting about an hour before bed. And sometimes I'll have the TV on, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll just sit on the couch next to, or like while Mr. Equineqt Cutie's watching TV, and I just kind of go Zen mode into knitting. And then it just kind of focuses my mind so that I can relax, go to sleep, and it really has helped. It might be weird, but for me it works. So, and of course my cat is making an appearance again with her noise making. I'm not quite sure why she's so needy lately. What? What do you need? What do you want? You have food. I know, I see you. I know you're beautiful. Yes, you have the prettiest green eyes. I'm sorry, she talks. My cat kind of thinks she's a dog. She acts like a dog anyway. Never really had her in the house with another cat, so she probably wouldn't know what to do with one. She's always been around dogs. Sorry, I realize I just took up like a minute talking to my cat. So there's different types of needles, or different, like, with the material they're made out of. Drop the first stitch, knit the second stitch. Different materials they're made out of. Did you really just jump up? I'm sorry if you can hear her purring in the microphone. What are you doing? Can you get down? Hopefully she doesn't try to walk under the camera. And I say, my knitting needles are metal, so they're a little louder. They clink a little bit. There are also bamboo needles, which, according to different Amazon reviews, some people really like them and some people say they split a lot, so I'm not really sure on those ones. I haven't tried a pair yet, but eventually I'll get some. If any of you guys are seasoned knitters and you have preferences and you wouldn't mind sharing, I would love them. It'll definitely help me as I grow and learn how to do this. I found a website that sells kits with patterns and things like that for different things you can knit. Kind of expensive, but I might treat myself next month. We'll see. Maybe I'll do a video like unpacking that and getting started.